Okay, so you're back, and we're going to keep talking about dangerous assumptions. And this one, the focus is going to be on intentions. And intention, what is that? That is the goal, that is the desire, that's where we want to go in our conversation, in our experience, and in our story when we try and bridge that gap by filling in the information, the unknown information between what we know to be true, what we don't know to be true, right? And that assumption space. And to do that, I want to start by talking to you about Scott and I. You know, when we first got married, we struggled a lot in communication. We both formulated an awful lot of dangerous assumptions, in particular when we would see each other's behavior. See, I grew up in a household. I'm the oldest of four kids, and I had many cousins and aunts and uncles, and so we were a big Spanish, Italian, loud family. And if you were to be heard, you learned how to talk with a louder voice. My husband, on the other hand, talking loud is like yelling. And so when we would try and engage in a conversation, he would shut down and walk away, and he'd get upset with me because he thought I was yelling. I wasn't yelling, but every time he would not engage and walk away, in my world, in my normal, that meant he didn't care. And can you imagine the friction, just the struggle we had relating to each other? In fact, it came to a head one day when I was trying really hard to talk really slow and really monotone, and somehow I blew it. I didn't understand, and he walked away and he says, if you would just stop yelling. And so I did what any normal person from where I come from would do and say, oh, okay, you want to see yelling? I'll show you yelling. And that took a while to work through that, so I don't recommend it. But again, when we talk about the assumptions, right, what we began to learn is that his normal is not my normal. But what we were doing is we were judging each other on behavior, and we weren't really taking a minute to recognize intentions. So we were going only so surface level. There's a quote that has been penned and refined over and over and over again, and it talks about this very issue. My favorite version of this quote is actually from a writing called The Reflections. I believe the author's name was Wigglesworth, and he said this. He says, you know, it's not strange that we overestimate ourselves as compared to others, for we judge by other people's doings, but ourself by our intentions. And so as we look at what's going on, can we take a minute and say, before I look at that behavior and come up with what I think is happening with that person, such as in mine, right? I saw Scott shut down and walk away. I actually was telling myself he didn't care. And if he didn't care, that meant I didn't matter. And if I didn't matter, that went right into my insecurities. And I see this a lot. In fact, I spent years, I was working in a particular capacity in an HR department, and it was not unusual that I was dealing with, you know, supervisors and subordinates, and they were having conflict. And this one woman, I remember, she just stormed in my office one day, and let's just say her name is Renee. And she came in so frustrated because her supervisor, she felt, was always tearing her down. I mean, just constantly tearing her down. And so I looked at her, I said, Renee, do you really think that Jennifer woke up today and thought to herself, how can I just make Renee's day awful? Like, how can I just make her feel as bad as she can about herself? Do you think that's true? And she goes, no, Stephanie, that's ridiculous. Of course that's not true. I said, but that's how you're telling yourself the story. And from it, not only are you angry and defensive, but you're also feeling really bad about yourself. I mean, what do we do with that? Can we go back to that? And now I'm going to ask you, do you think your supervisor, Jennifer, is actually doing the best she can today? Is that a possibility? Are you open to that being a possibility? And she says, I am. I said, okay, then let's take a step back on this. And now we're going to go ahead and learn, how do we get clarification? Maybe there's a conversation to have with Jennifer, right? And to ask her, is she aware of how A, B, and C is affecting you? Maybe she doesn't know. Maybe it's just her normal and it's worked for her. And it would be helpful if the two of you could sit down and have that conversation. Because if we believe that Jennifer doesn't want to hurt you, then let's make Jennifer aware that what is happening is hurting you, and let's work it out. So I hope that's helpful to you. Next week, we're going to talk about noise. It's an interesting concept. It's helped me a lot, so I hope you'll join me next week. Have a great week.